Hey, do you like drinking? Do you like vaping? Do you like to cuss? And this show is for you. It's BattleAxTheater.
BattleAxTheater. That's a good name.
BattleAx, man. He brought the preach video.
BattleAxTheater.
Death from BattleAx. I don't know if you guys have seen, he just rants, and it's awesome. And he just starts screaming and yelling. I need to have a beer with that guy.
Sorry about that. We just did the whole intro and we had no sound because apparently something's fucked with the scenes on the other machine. But anyway, what's up, guys? Punk Shoe here with BattleAxTheater. I'm here with my boy Def. That was a fun little thing that we just did, but whatever.
Wait. So we were just talking and no one could hear us?
Yeah, we're good now.
Okay.
This scene was muted coming from the primary system, but shit happens. What are you gonna do? Oh, we're doing that thing again. Look at that. Oh, you see the color change?
Oh, dude, you look beautiful though.
Hup.
We
Anyway,
we need to start the show with some like techno music, and we're like, and then you can just lean in and out and in and out. I think that would be easy. Yeah.
Fucking Trogdor. I hope y'all know Trogdor. Oh shit, I'm peeking. I hope y'all know Trogdor, because if you don't know Trogdor, you need to go back and make sure that your parents are cool with you watching this stream. I kid. So yeah, we've got a fun little topic tonight. What's up, Def? You had to say something.
No. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
We got a fun little topic.
Keep bullshitting.
Well, we can keep bullshitting.
No.
But yeah, so we have a cool little topic tonight. We're going to talk about loot. And this was Def's idea. And I should have made him host, but I know,
No.
Come on, man.
I'd be all like, hey, guys, we're going to talk about loot. What's up? And then I would just I would expect the chat to just be all like, and then I would just, I don't know.
You would expect the chat to do all the work, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't be, I don't think I'd be a good host.
They'd be like, what? Well, Def, what about loot?
It fucking rules, man. It's why I play my games. That's what I'd say, I think.
Okay. That's good. So we're going to talk a little bit about loot. We're going to talk about its history, specifically in the multiplayer genres, going back to like the late 1990s. And but we're going to talk about the evolution of that and how it became the system that it is, how the loot itself has kind of changed how things function, changed the genre, changed the industry as a whole. We'll talk a little bit about that. Before we get into that, let's get into the weekend rear view.
Lord.
Yeah, this is where we talk about what we did for the last week. Why don't you tell us what you did last week, Def?
Well, Monday night after last week's show, I woke up at 1 o'clock in the morning and I was throwing up, and among other things. So I was sick all last week, and it worked out though. We didn't do a video, but we pulled an old video from the vault.
We sure did.
Which was one of our first videos we ever did, which was, of course, the Palace of the Dead guide. So that was cool. Other than that, I played some Destiny 2 with you.
Just a little bit?
A game that we started when you was over here, and I think we were kind of not serious about it. We were just hanging out. We're like, gonna check it out. And now we're kind of, maybe we're sucked in. I'm not sure.
You sure as hell are.
Okay, maybe a little bit. I do like playing a little PvP every now and then.
I'm really surprised by it too, because like you said, I wasn't planning on being invested at all. Like we had originally, way back when it was announced that it was going to be on PC and through the Blizzard launcher, all of us were kind of contemplating about getting like the $90 edition, so we'd have the annual pass and all that shit. and I was
Oh, the
serious about it.
expansions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then we got into Warframe, and then the original release of D2 was just super lackluster, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I played Destiny 1 on Xbox back in the day, and while we were waiting for Destiny 2, we checked out Warframe, which we fell in love with. And as a Destiny 1 player, I'm like, why the fuck would anyone play Destiny 2 when you got this shit? And Warframe, for what it is a great game. I feel like we're betraying DE for playing Destiny 2, but that's that's another subject. But dude, for a free-to-play game, Warframe is amazing.
Warframe is amazing, and for those of you that aren't aware, Destiny is shifting off of Activision, off the Battle.net launcher. They're moving over to Steam, and they are offering up to level 30. All the first-year content is absolutely free to play, so that is kind of a nice, get your foot in the door and see if you actually want to spend some money on it.
I tell you what,
what's up?
Destiny 2 is free right now, so if anyone wants to try it out and let us know and add us, because I would love to like get a raid team going, with some other peeps without some randos in the game.
Yeah, it'd be fun. I would like to do that.
I mean, it's not for everybody, but it's pretty fun. I've been having fun.
Yeah, me too, man. I'm glad we finally found something that we can enjoy. We're still well, Destiny 2 instead now. Destiny 2 is just on Steam now. Yeah. So Destiny 2 is going to Steam on September 20.
September sometime in September.
Sometime in September, and you'll have all that same entry level content for free. What's cool is if you've also played this on console, if you're coming to us as a console gamer, and you had Destiny 2 on PS4 or Xbox. Wait, it was on both those systems, right? It wasn't an exclusive, right?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, if you had it on either of those systems, you're actually going to get cross-platform saves. So you're not going to be able to play with other people on other platforms, but what you will have is you will have access to your save. So the second you install it and load it up on Steam, you're going to have your shit from before. So you're going to have all your saves and stuff. So if you were well geared and maybe you quit after Warmind or something like that, you're going to have all your stuff.
And being a PC gamer, it's awesome, because if Destiny 1 was on PC, I would have played it on PCs. It's just so much nicer navigating it's like going ESO. I played ESO on Xbox before I played it on PC, and PC was much nicer. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's good. It's nice. I'm enjoying it. Like I said, I had no intention of like getting relatively involved in it. Like I was gonna dabble with it, but I found myself the other night after Def went to bed, just kind of wandering around. Next thing I know, I'm like 2 levels.
I accidentally got 5 levels.
It wasn't 5. It was 2.5.
Oh, okay.
But still, it was pretty bad. But so this week, what I did was pretty much the same thing. I did the Destiny 2 thing. Sold a couple computers rather. I got started on this thing right over here. You can kind of see in the background. It's a total gut job. The previous owners just didn't take any care of it. It was really dirty.
Bitch.
It's Def's old computer.
Bitch, why you gotta tell everybody?
Because I gotta call you out on the live internets. But I'm gonna get that cleaned up. Got that started. But for the most part, it's just been some Destiny. Started working on a video for Zombidle for that other channel that I'm not going to promote here, because I want to see if people here somehow find that through searching for BattleAxTheater, because there is an affiliation, but it's a test channel. So if you happen to find my idle channel, holler at me, follow, and subscribe and all that good stuff.
You're just going to make people guess what it is?
Yeah, we'll make people guess, because that's the experiment, right? The experiment is to see how it grows organically without any promotion, because that's like, there's a lot of networking that goes into what we do here at BattleAxe, and I want to see if all that effort that's going in for the exposure and it's like, I love meeting new people, but in terms of like how it affects the business model, like I'm wondering if it's worth the time investment. I'm still going to go out there and talk to people and meet people, but if the organic growth is the same situation as, promoting. I'm not going to fucking piss all over people just trying to promote. I'm going to try to have, more genuine relationships built there.
Right. I get you. So you're just going to see how it grows on its own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I got you. And that kind of gives you like 2 avenues, if you will.
Yeah. And last I checked, it was like up to like 20 subscribers. It's been going for about a month and a half now, 2 months, something like that. No, about a month and a half.
I remember when we had 20 subs.
Me too, man. So I'm curious to see what happens. Shout out to all you subscribers that are in chat. Shout out to you subscribers that are not here and watching this VOD. We appreciate the support, and we hope we're doing right by you. I know things have been a little bit, I don't know, I want to say off lately, but we're just trying. There's a new thing that we're trying to do, trying to get right in the headspace. So hopefully we can deliver a little bit better content. We are going to have some more, typical videos that we would normally produce coming up here in the next few weeks. But, who knows? But, that's basically all I did this past week was kind of dick around with some of that stuff, trying to get that video ready. But, same old. We've got a couple new segments that we're going to do coming up soon, too.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to have to wait till July before that that happens.
July?
Yeah. Our 2-year anniversary.
Oh, right. Yeah. Damn, we've been doing this for 2 years, man. That's crazy.
So to be fair, though, recall we were doing this for 2 years, but we've actually only been really doing this since like October when we started getting on a regular schedule. So
yeah, October of last year, yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of cool like, that we've been in YouTube land for 2 years. Time fucking flies, man. So
it does.
We are 18 after. It is 9:18 Eastern, and looks like we got some people in chat. So let's have a conversation about.
Well, we already have a loot question from Spine. I don't know if you want to start with that or you want to save that and go with what he said later.
So
because I know we're going to touch on that.
Keep it in the back of your mind, and if it ties into the introduction or a discussion, feel free to bring it up. So I want to talk. What I want to talk about tonight is loot. So Jeff brought this to my attention. Loot. Let's talk about loot. Let's talk about the history of it. Let's talk about the impact of it. And I'm like, well, how do you formulate this? How do you make a discussion that lasts 30 to 45 minutes on this topic? And really, what I was thinking was, what was the impact? And I'm going to focus on a key element through the majority of this. Hate it, love it, whatever. It kind of is what it is. World of Warcraft, Blizzard, Diablo 1. We're going to focus on tipping points with those companies because, and there's another company we'll talk about here, or another IP that we'll talk about here shortly, that had another huge influence. But I think these are going to, this is the reality of it, right? I mean, we might have a distaste for WoW, but at the end of the day, it had its place and it did so much for the industry. So it's going to be something to talk about there. So
I don't really have a distaste for WoW. I just, from what WoW's become, I do, but not back in the day, it's all right.
Right, that's what I'm saying. It had its place and it did what it needed to do for the industry. So loot, what is loot? Loot is, it's the shit that we get from quests. It's the shit that we get from picking them up mobs. It's essentially stuff that we loot.
Now it's what we get from quests. Back in the day, you didn't always get loot for every quest.
It's true.
You know what I mean? Loot's what keeps me playing a video game because it's what I play it for, or I play it to get my friends loot. Like, bro, we need to go here. I'm gonna get you this badass robe. You need to be here for this. I don't want it to rot. Stuff like that.
Yeah. So I mean, loot it drives a lot of people to play games. And it goes back all the way to it was a dependency all the way back to way back when, back before there were these really in-depth multiplayer games, these in-depth RPGs, all the way back to pen and paper, where you had loot in a game that made your character stronger. So there's not only character personal growth, but loot was always the thing that kind of topped things off at the end of the day, because it was something that you can modulate outside of character growth and in terms of statistics and things like that. You can modify those statistics with the loot. And it's, you look at raid guilds, and things like that. You look at people that play games hardcore because like that, like on the hardcore end, like Diablo 2, for instance, when it was in its heyday, like that was a big thing, is to have a loot farming toon. I don't remember what they were, sorcerers, wizards. I don't remember what it was, but you could take them out and you could farm like crazy and get all this loot that that you could then turn around and trade, or you could hold it for your friends, or in some cases you could sell it on the internet. And
Well,
go ahead.
Without loot, there wouldn't be a game. Period.
I don't think that's necessarily true. I think you can have an adventure without there being loot.
I mean, you can have an adventure, but like, I wouldn't play it.
Yeah, and I think that's a valid point, and that's why this is a discussion I think that needs to be had, is because it's a very important role, right? Like, you can go on a forum and you can role play all day about your character and this and that, and how you stand in a social situation, or you can play Dungeons and Dragons with no combat and no loot, where everything's just plays out RP. But there's a certain small niche of people that actually would want to do that and enjoy that kind of content.
Yeah. I'm the type of person that I like to see my friends get loot too. Like,
Yeah.
I think you mentioned this when we were talking about this topic briefly. Like, there's certain people out there that are like, I don't care about the loot. I just want to have fun. And it's like, bitch, you need loot. Yeah, you're not gonna get to the next raid or the next dungeon unless you get some better gear. Fucking. Being a Larry over there, just dragging everybody down because they don't, care about loot. But that's one of the things that always wanted me to get other people into the game. You know what I mean? It's like, man, I can hook you up, bro. If you come on, I'll get you some good gear. It's fun getting new things.
It is. And if you look back before, like, this whole cosmetic craze where you could send, Square Enix $7 of your hard-earned money to get an outfit. Like, if you look back before that, loot was a way for you to have this cosmetic look. Because I can remember back in, like, Burning Crusade, or, in vanilla, Final Fantasy 11, EQOA. Like, it was, you got gear, and sometimes you'd have people that weren't even using, like, you'd have casters using gear back in vanilla WoW that had like agility or something on it because they liked the way the appearance was on that piece of gear.
Right.
So I mean, it's, gear has its importance. So if we take a look back at the history of loot, I mean, like I said, you've got Dungeons and Dragons where you progressed a little bit further in the game, and you always started off with like your basic gear. But you had things that would develop like into magical gear, like +1 items, +2, 3, 4, 7, etc. But you also had your like lore type items that would be like what we see in modern games, where you've got like a spell effect on a trinket or weapon or something like that, which was pretty cool. So, well, before we dive too much into that, so like, what was your first experience with loot in a game?
You know what I'm gonna say, bro. EverQuest.
Really? Nothing before then? You didn't play anything before EverQuest that had loot?
No, I don't think so, man.
Okay.
I mean, I think I was playing EQ at 13 or so.
Gotcha.
So that was my first game to like, and I think I've told you the story, but I'll tell chat. Back when you could lose your corpse, and in Greater Fadar, you've been there, Kellethan. It was like 4 o'clock in the morning. My ass needs to get to bed, and oracle falls from the fucking tree because in EverQuest they would glitch. They would walk, and then they would glitch up in the tree. So apparently that happened. There was no maps. He kills me, and I was up to like 8 in the morning trying to find my corpse. Jeez. Devastated, man. And all it was like AC2 rawhide gear, and like to me though, as my first experience with loot, I'm like, oh my fucking god, dude!
You feel like your life is over.
I did, dude. It was like a hard drive going. Shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It was bad.
Well, my first real experience with any loot that was impactful. I mean, I'm a big Final Fantasy fan, playing it all the way back to, I think Tactics was the first one. Final Fantasy Tactics is one of the first video games that really engaged me outside of like your Mario and Yoshi's World and Tetris and shit like that. I used to play on my Game Boy back in the day. But outside of Final Fantasy, like when we start looking at games that were really, really loot focused, that things were more procedurally generated or randomized, if you will, was Diablo 1. And I can remember I would go over to my friend's house after school and I had to do like a 2-mile bike ride to get to his house. We'd be going over there to play Twisted Metal on the PlayStation, and I would ride my bicycle out there, and when I would arrive, we'd always spend like the first hour him wrapping up a dungeon dive in Diablo 1. And that was like the first time I saw anything like that. And I didn't think of anything of it because I wasn't a PC gamer. I didn't own a PC at the time. But it was just really cool, the concept of like going down deeper and deeper into this dungeon. The loot gets better and better. The mobs get more difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always thought that was cool. And like the randomized loot, like it kind of like developed this culture at some point where it was like, you know, loot became this thing that people were just hungry for, you know, and it kind of changed things, which we'll get into here in a little bit. So that was my first thing. And then when I got my first PC, started playing Diablo 2. That was my first online game that I ever played. I bought that, pre-ordered it, and yeah, that was pretty intense. Any of you guys have played Diablo 2, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know, there's loot for days there. Did you ever play Diablo 2?
Well, when I was playing EverQuest, I had friends that would always throw that in my face, you know, oh, I'll play Diablo 2, you know, blah, blah, blah. But I do know about the cow level.
Okay.
Is that secret level, I guess, where you just kill cows for days?
Moo, yeah.
I know about that. No, I know a lot of, actually, because speaking of loot, I want to talk about Path of Exile here in a minute. But I know the developers that made Path of Exile were wanting that next Diablo 2. That's why they made that game.
Right.
And so I do know a lot about D2, and I do know how impactful it was, you know. Because I had a lot of friends that played it. A lot of friends begged me to get it.
I remember the comparisons where, like, you'd go to school and you'd talk to your friends, and they talk about playing EverQuest, and you'd be like, yeah, well, I played Diablo 2. And they're like, well, it's not exactly the same. And I'm like, dude, it's got to be pretty close. I mean, it's the same premise. But
yeah,
even looking back now, like, I'm thinking Diablo 2, isometric, roguelike, you know, run around, you know, AoE things, get your loot, and then the little tiny window that EverQuest used to be in.
Yeah.
So, like, they are worlds apart in reality. Like, the premise is there, but you got to think, like, back then we didn't have this concept of all these different genres. Like, we thought online game, and you thought, you know, something that had some sort of like role play, like RPG type aspect. You know, basically any game that was online multiplayer with a storyline was all the same in our minds.
Back in like 2000, I remember Counter-Strike, Diablo 2, and EverQuest just being like the top 3, like, you know, most addictive, most loot-based game. Well,
and then SOCOM.
Not loot-based, but
you remember SOCOM for the PlayStation 2?
I don't. I never owned a PlayStation.
Gotcha. That was pretty huge. But I do remember that. Yeah. I mean, you had Counter-Strike was on the PC, TF2 eventually. I don't even remember when TF2 came out. I think that was in the mid 2000s. But yeah, so you had, you know, those games that were out, the Counter-Strikes, you had SOCOM, you had Call of Duty, stuff like that.
Unreal,
man. Unreal, yeah. Can't forget about Unreal. But how many of those? Like, go ahead.
Well, so that's a good transition, because like now when you play a shooter game, you have loot. Unreal didn't have loot. You just went in and killed people. You know, now if you play some of these new Call of Duty games and, you know, Destiny and all these shooter loot, that's a genre now, shooter looter.
Right.
You know, because of the way MMOs, RPGs have inspired or, you know, started that movement.
Right, yeah. So let's reel that back a little bit, and let's talk about where that shift happened, right? So when we go back and we talk about Diablo, like, that's where you really start to see loot. You start to see loot and EverQuest evolve into this thing that's this huge necessity, but more like in a like traditional Dungeons and Dragons style, where like there's this preconceived list of loot, and then people can figure out where it comes from. They know what stats they need, but it's important for progression. It's important to move forward. So like that becomes like a focal point, because again, that's something you can modify easily, is loot tables. You can modify, statistics on loot, etc., to control the multiplayer environment in terms of progression and desire, especially with like visual designs in that loot. And I think that's where we start to see that shift really, is with EverQuest and Dark Age of Camelot, Asheron's Call, Diablo 2. Like that was like the shining era of when this everything just kind of shifted to this new thing called the MMORPG.
Right.
So
I do agree.
And I don't know, like I almost feel like in a way it was almost the death of like your arena style games, right? Because like, Unreal became a little less popular. Halo was it had its own thing, but now it has to compete with not only RPGs, not only sports games, not only your platformers and things like that, or your action adventures, but now there's this whole new thing that combines so many elements of every game together.
And it goes a little farther than loot. I mean, it goes into progression. Even if there's not loot in a game, there's always some way to make your character better.
Right.
Whether it's the amount of XP you gain, so you gain a point. You spend that point, you get better kick speed in a soccer game or something. I don't know. but you know what I mean?
Yeah, so going back on what you were saying, it's like there was this thing where like, well, these other games are like, well, if we are going to compete, we're going to have to add things in our games. I remember the first time I played a Madden game where you could actually make your own character. Like that was a crazy moment in time. Or when you first started playing shooters, where it was no longer like you were getting levels and you were leveling up and getting skills within the shooter, or being able to customize your guns and add different elements to your gun. Hell, dude, I remember, and this is completely off base from multiplayer games, Need for Speed, the original Hot Pursuit, one of my favorite games. I love that so much because that's when they started adding into the racing games like the shop mechanics, where you could add like the spoilers and like engine upgrades. You could fine tune the suspension.
Keep talking.
I don't know what to say, but yeah, like that was awesome, because I love the fact that it's such a distraction.
I was pouring beer and it went all on my seat, man.
Motherfucker committed a party foul in the middle of a stream.
Sorry, bro. But dude, I remember Tecmo Super Bowl 3 on the Super Nintendo, and you can make your own character, man.
Really?
Yeah, dude, it was crazy.
I never even knew there was a Tecmo Bowl 3.
Oh, dude, it was one of the best.
Because that would have been around when Madden started coming out, was the Super Nintendo era.
My bad, guys.
He's done. We can get back on topic. But yeah, I just remember being able to do all that shit. And it reminded me of like your personal growth in a Final Fantasy game. Now, this is before, the PlayStation 1, it wasn't online. So it was still a single player game, but it gave you that depth. Like it wasn't just, pick one of 6 cars and drive around a track. It was become attached to this car that you like to drive the courses you enjoy, upgrade your car, eventually buy tracks for other courses, and learn those cars, and you become attached to them, especially when they started adding like custom designs and shit to it. And I think, that's a mentality that's really kept on going and is still strong, is that whole like cosmetic thing, but we'll talk about that more in a little bit. Yeah. So all right, so let's talk about the shift. And so we had the shift where loot became like this really strong point. We got into raiding, you got, your heavy loot focus and things like that. With these online games, so it's like this whole big thing that's all encompassing. But what of the fact that you're now having to fight for loot versus other people?
Well, that was kind of a delicate subject to me, because in EverQuest, you had your top raiding guilds. You had people camping that one progression mob, or boss or whatever,
right?
But at the same time, it was just kind of like, even if you didn't like that guild, you kind of had a respect thing. Well, that's where they're at. We gotta wait till they defeat that progression, then we can get there. You know,
Right.
there's no like, you're fighting for it, but at the same time, you're like, you have respect that they got there first.
I think that it's like you said, it's kind of a delicate subject, and I think it's delicate because loot can ruin friendships, guys.
Oh, I've seen it happen.
And while we're talking here, tell us a little bit of experience. Like I'd like to know if you guys have like a little short like blurb of a story to tell us about your experience with loot and individuals, whether it be, somebody coming in that you don't know who the fuck they are, they get into your raid group, you've been raiding for 6 months and trying to get this piece of loot, it finally drops and this asshole gets it. But I can remember a very particular experience and in our guild in Unlimited, and this was, I'm trying to remember which expansion it was. I think it might have actually been Resurrection after Unlimited shifted to Resurrection. But B and Z were out and they were like doing daily grind, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I believe it was B and Z, or it might have been B and somebody else. But I remember that we're in fucking officer chat and all that. We're sitting there, we're just chilling, and out of nowhere, there's like this beef between B and this other person because something had dropped from a mob, and it was a world drop, and it was a purple, and it was worth something, and the guy wanted it. It's fair loot. It's 2 guys in a group. It drops, and somehow one dude managed to get it. I think B got it, and he was just going to sell it. And this guy was a hunter, and it was a spear or something that he could use for a survival hunter. I don't remember the specifics of it, but all I know is something that he could use. And B got it and was just going to sell it. And this dude was fucking pissed. Now, my mentality is I'm kind of a socialist in that regard. Like, if you're just going to profit from it and you're going to make a bunch of money, and you've already got plenty of money, and B did because he'd been around for a while and he'd been hanging with us, and he raided, so he had cash flow, right? This guy is a new player, just started playing the game, at the end of last expansion, and has this opportunity to get a piece of gear that's going to kind of push him forward a little bit. And even at the end of the day, if he sold it, he needed it more than B did. But go ahead.
I agree with that mentality because I'm the same way. Like, the other guy should have got that 100%. But the other guy's he's also paying for a sub.
Yeah, and that's where it becomes a delicate subject, right?
He's technically not wrong, but he's a dickhead. B would be a dickhead.
Right.
Right, yeah.
Because this dude needed it. So I mean, it's like, where do you draw the line at that? And it's kind of hard, like a hard subject to talk about, because like you could have the best of friends, but then the one piece of loot really drops that. Let's say you've been raiding with this dude for 4 years and everything's been pretty kosher, and then you're getting to the new expansion, you're having a hard time getting this piece of loot. Maybe you're 2 separate classes. Maybe you're 2 different caster classes that can use the same cloak. And the cloak, maybe you're a mage and the other dude's a warlock, but both of them has haste on it, or the item has haste on it. You can both use it. And you're having a hard time getting it to drop. You're playing on a low pop server like Shadow Council, so world drops aren't really a readily available thing. And when they are available, they're so expensive that it's not worth it, because you probably get a drop the very next raid, which happened to me. But yeah, so like you're having a hard time getting this to drop, and then all of a sudden it drops one day, and you both have equal amounts of DKP or whatever the loot system you're using. You both have a fair shot. You both come up to it, and then there's a roll, and you roll a 4, and then your buddy rolls, and he rolls like a 36, and you're like, well, that's a shit roll on both our parts, but I don't have good luck. Like, it really comes down to luck, right? Like, who's got the better luck in life? And then, like, that kind of plants a seed. Like, there's a little bit of pissed offness. You're like, yeah, stupid motherfucker. And you look at the DPS charts, and he's like, you're like 3rd, and he's like 5th. And
Meanwhile, you're like, congrats, brother. I'm so happy for
you.
you.
And over here, like, you're just like, you're like, wrist, fuck my life. I fucking hate this game. Piece of shit. And then you have to fucking fake it. And sure, it probably boils over if you're genuinely friends. Or boils over. It passes, right? But like at the end of the day, though, that stings, because you needed that loot, because games like World of Warcraft have said that you need that loot.
Yeah. You sparked something, a memory from EQ. One of the raiding, it's like an after hours raiding crew that would happen in EQ. And when you rolled, they would do it with the lowest number you won the loot. I always thought that was kind of cool because I'm always rolling like a fucking 2. So I won some loot.
Golf rules are kind of cool. Like I did raid with a couple raid groups that did that, and we would do it. It was one of the ways that we would mix things up a little bit in Unlimited. We would mix it up sometimes. We used a council type system, so it was a combination. Like, all right, you give me a roll. The 3 people who wanted it, they roll. Then we look at their attendance. We look at their contributions. We'd discuss it in council chat. And then we make the decision on who gets the loot. But the roll definitely impacts it. So if somebody rolls a 90, but maybe they're lower on the totem pole of who should get the loot, it's going to be a huge factor into it.
Well, Spine just said something about DKP being a touchy loot system. What do you think about DKP?
DKP had its problems in the sense that somebody could raid for an entire tier of raids and then go away for an entire tier, come back, still have DKP, and just be right on the top of the loot, even though they've been absent for the last 6 months and that other person's been there raiding regularly for 9 months. So it can put distaste. There was a system called EPGP. Are you familiar with that?
No, I'm not.
So EPGP is what we used in Fusion, and we used DKP in when I was in Black Omen. But in Fusion, we use EPGP, and what that does is it works in a way similar to DKP in the sense that you get points that are assigned for being there and showing up, and each boss or whatever you would get a set amount. So those who don't know, if I may be incorrect, but if I do believe it's called Dragon Kill Points is what it stands for, and it did originate in EverQuest and that's where the Dragon Kill Points come from. But EPGP is earn points, gear points. So what it does is it has this ratio, right? So you get assigned EP, which is earn points, is your DKP, but then you spend those like a currency, okay? And then there's also a ratio that's factored. It looks at how geared you are. So let's say you've got plenty of EP to be able to purchase this item, but then a dude that's very under geared, and it's at, like, let's say it's a 15 eye level upgrade for you, but it's a 56 or 57 or 100 eye level upgrade for the dude below you that needs it. He obviously needs it more, so it factors that in there. So it's like there's this golden ratio there, and it'll say, okay, well, he gets awarded it. So you might get pissed because it's your best in slot, but that dude could get it because it's much better for him than it is for you in terms of overall raid progress. So it's like I kind of agree with it there, but at the same time I disagree with it, because if it was best in slot, I feel like a best in slot should go to your core raider that's been there and put in the effort. And the other thing about EPGP is it would decay over time. So let's say that you're a hardcore raider and you had all these earn points, and then you left and you had to move and you were gone for the entire summer. You missed 3 months of raid. Every raid, those points would decay a little bit, and it was a percentage usually.
I was about to say I like that.
It's a very well-rounded system. It really is.
Because that eliminates, like you were saying earlier with the DKP, someone that's been raiding for 9 months takes a 6-month break, and they still got all this DKP when they come back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because, there's only, in today's games, there's, 12, 25 people most raiding. So, not all those people are going to be able to raid consistently. So even if you take a 6-month break, you're still going to have a shit ton of DKP.
Right.
Whenever you come back to whatever raid team that's currently there.
Now, I don't remember what you guys used in Resurrection, but at some point I know that they were using Suicide Kings, which is something that I was typically exposed to in pug groups. And Suicide Kings was basically everyone would roll out a number at the beginning of the raid. You'd be put into this system in order of highest number to lowest. If you got loot, though, you were moved to the bottom. So you had to go back up, and then let's say nobody above you wanted that loot and it came to your turn and you wanted it, you'd get it.
I remember that.
And that system's all right, but what happens if something that you really need drops from 2 mobs back to back?
Yeah.
And the
Well,
person, go ahead.
the whole thing about this whole, like, we're talking about how you obtain loot in raids and whatnot. The only thing that gets me is that, we're talking about that person's like, I don't care about loot, Well, like, you're part of a team, you know what I mean? Everybody needs that loot. But it just comes down to, like, how you feel. Like, if let's say you got pretty good set going on, but you need 4 pieces. You need the 4 best in slot pieces, and some other people are getting that like every fucking week. Like, how do you treat that? Like, do you get pissed off? Like, God damn it, I need those fucking arms. You know what I mean? Larry's over there and he just got the arms and nothing else. If I had those arms, it would complete me. You know what I mean?
I think what it comes down is your raid lead, right? And then I think this is going to segue really nicely into the next thing I want to talk about. But it came down to your raid lead. Like, they'd have to look at that, and then they would send a tell behind the scenes, like, hey Larry, Dev's, he really needs that. It's part of his best in slot. We noticed that over the course of the last 6 raids, you've procured two cloaks with your DKP, and that's fine. That's your DKP. You can spend it how you want. But that cloak that you're about to roll on now is a very minor, like 2% upgrade, where it's a 50% upgrade for Def. Would you be so kind as to let him have it? You know what I mean? Like that falls on your raid lead. And that's how I used to lead raids. And that's one of the reasons why we use the council system. Because on paper, it wasn't a black and white system, but it was something that we could all have a discussion and we could determine. And I will tell you, it pissed people off because nobody likes to be told, well, it's your fair chance. You won the roll on that loot, but we're not going to give it to you. Because then they cry favoritism, but they don't realize that you're doing it for the betterment of the raid group as a whole so you can get the next boss down. So It is a tough topic. And that kind of segues into what happened with personal loot. So as we look at games now, almost everything is a personal loot system, right?
Yeah, it's dumb. I don't know. Is it dumb? How do you feel about it? I'm kind of mixed on it, honestly.
I think it takes away from that element of, I mean, it removes drama, but I think the drama is necessary to have this conversation, period, when it comes to working with other people and playing an MMO. Right? I mean,
it does remove that. Oh shit! The arms of badassery just dropped. It's other than that, it's like, oh, bro, I just got the arms of badassery.
Yeah.
It removes that shock factor. Like, holy shit, that dropped. I want to roll for it.
Well, and you would have certain individuals that would get personal loot that they didn't need, and in World of Warcraft, you could trade your personal loot for a couple of hours after raid, and they'd be spiteful, and they'd rather have a shard out of it. And I can remember a particular individual that got something that I needed, and instead they were like, oh no, I need this, and instead of letting me have that or letting me even pay them for it, out of spite, at the end of the raid, I watched them disenchant it.
Oh.
Yeah, I think you know who those individuals are. So, yeah.
I know, but...
Okay. But yeah.
I'll give it to you later.
I remember that, and that hurts you to your core, right? Like, these are people that you go into battle with every week, and you do this raid content, and for them to get their personal loot and not share it with you when you would do the opposite for them. Like, if it was, I remember so many times, I had to get a trinket, and I would go, mine's not as good, but it's almost as good, and I see you're still using a blue, and I remember being there, bro. I remember, 3 hunters in the raid. I remember, Wiley, man, you're using that same trinket I fucking used for forever. Please just take this trinket, man. Are you sure? Yeah, absolutely, man, because that's going to make your damage better so you can focus more on mechanics, and you don't have to worry about trying to top the meters by, going spam crazy, because now you have a trinket that's worth a damn.
Ooh, that's another topic we should touch on one day.
What's that?
DPS meters.
We could talk about that. That does not warrant an entire stream, but I think that could definitely come up. Unfortunately, it doesn't really tie into
Whoa. I mean, not just that specifically, but,
I think that is something definitely, because I'd like to talk raid culture some night. What do you guys think? I know there's 9 of you guys here. Spine's the only one talking, so we want to hear from you guys. What do you think? Like,
And Spine's about to leave. Spine, wait, let's get to Spine's question real quick.
All right, before you leave, Spine, what's the question? It was about loot
said,
scaling.
Yeah, do you think putting level restrictions on loot is a good thing? Do you think armor should scale based on a level?
Well, what do you think?
Level?
You go ahead first. We'll keep you for just a minute, Spine.
I don't. I don't know. I kind of like the level restrictions.
I'll tell you now. I don't like scaling. I don't like scaling.
I don't like. I like the restrictions because it gives you something to work forward to. You know what I mean? Like, I just got this loot. I can't work till I'm 15, so it makes you want to play more. It makes you look forward to that piece of loot. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's where I stand on it.
But I also kind of like the idea of being that guy that has something that normally a level 50 would get, and you're only level 43, you know, and being able to use that. But you're right. I think it really does make you have to work toward that. It gives you a goal. You know, just having something in your gear, you're like, I'm going to stay up till 4 o'clock tonight to get this last level so I can wear this new sword of badassery.
Yeah.
If you guys can still hear this, there's some technical difficulties on my end. Give me just a moment here.
Some specific gear that would be twink gears. I thought that was kind of cool.
Dude, I totally cut out, so I'm glad you kept talking. Oh man, that was rough. Like everything froze up on my end.
Yeah, I think the whole stream did, honestly.
Did it? Oh right.
I'm not sure, but
we're back. We're back. We're good. So, Spine, I hope that answers your question. Like, what do we think on it? Like, it's nice to have something to work toward too. Yeah. Like, all right. So I think it's cool that you can go out and get some gear and there's no restrictions on it. So, like, you can go to a vendor with your main and give your alt a bunch of gear that just helps them level up faster. I think that's kind of cool. But at the same time, like, why aren't more games doing like Final Fantasy where you're not having to focus on single character alts? But yeah, thanks for hanging, Spine, man. Don't let us keep you too long. We appreciate you watching the stream and talking with us. Again, we welcome any commentary from anyone else. We'd love to have a conversation about loot. You know, talk a little bit more about what your experiences are with it. We are going to be wrapping up the stream here in about 10 minutes or so.
10-ish.
So if you have any questions, feel free to shoot them our way in chat, whether it be about loot, whether it's just general burning questions about BattleAxTheater as a whole. If you want to talk about this lull on YouTube, we can talk about that too. Fuck it, just ask questions. But do you have any final thoughts on loot before we continue?
I want to mention one of my favorite loot systems.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Go ahead.
Path of fucking Exile. It is probably one of the most addictive games I've played since EverQuest specifically because of the loot. And now you touched on this earlier, Punk, about I think WoW being one of the first games that introduced randomization in the loot, so the stats would be random.
Right.
Path of Exile did that. Path of Exile would also do things where you could get, like, everything that you loot is a currency. Everything.
Yeah, that was interesting, but go ahead.
Yeah, even your gray items. You know how most MMO or RPGs has like a colored system, so you know how good it is. Well, even your grays, you could get like 40 scrolls of wisdom, which is like the most common drop you're going to get. Those scrolls of wisdom, they identify unidentified gear. So you would see the properties if you use that scroll. Well, you could take 40 of those scrolls, turn them into something else, turn that whatever you get into something else. So every single thing that drops in Path of Exile meant something. And dude, that's what kept my fucking interest in that game, was the fucking loot.
Yeah, that and it was a really cool system that everything could be used to buy everything else, basically. So that was pretty cool.
And one more thing that was cool was, so you would get like, let's say it was called the Burning Staff.
Mhm.
Well, in Path of Exile, it could be the Burning Staff of Iskabar, or the Burning Staff of Shaynar. It would have a different name at that, and then it would have like a unique property of that
Right.
item. But even though it was the same item,
Yeah,
stuff like that was
absolutely.
always pretty cool.
And that's gonna
And-
go ahead.
oh, I was gonna say ESO kind of does that, a little
Right.
bit with some of the unique properties in their
Yeah,
gear.
like the crafted gear and things like that for sure.
Mhm.
Now, and we'll I'm going to bring that to another subject here in just a minute, but I want to address Renfail real quick. So yeah, as far as DKP is concerned, that was one of the reasons why I loved EPGP so much, because it did have other things that were added to the DKP system to kind of keep it well rounded. But in a way, it analytically looked at people's gear level and looked at the raid as a whole and tried to make sure everybody was on the same page so the whole guild could progress. But at the same time, one could argue that, there's nothing that is ideal about socialism. Like, like it's not human nature to go by that. Most people don't want the betterment of the whole. They want to see themselves progress. And I think that can be said for any raid environment. Even if you're with your best people, there's always going to be at least one person there that, they look at this as a time investment and they've got other things that they could do. And if they're not going to get the loot that they need or what they want, they'd rather just not be there, or they'd like to show their ass because of it. So yeah. And that, and that's another good topic he brings up, is the fact that being a tank, or in my case, healers as well, anybody who's going to help keep your raid alive during mechanics, I think those are, the loot is reserved for those people, if you will. I think it's important to keep that in mind, because,
Well, especially if you have that one particular healer that's showing up every fucking week carrying, not necessarily carrying, but being, well, I guess you could say that, being a part of the team. Like,
Right.
every fucking week you see Daddy Punk Shoe there, you know what I mean?
You're
And
not
it's
too far off base, but yeah, go ahead.
I'm just saying, they deserve that, like, because they're reliable. And if your raid leaders see that person's reliable, and they know you're going to be there for the next 3 weeks, you should get a little bump.
Yeah, and I just think as healers and tanks as a whole, that's a good thing to really focus on.
Yeah.
But, so shifting it back to what you're talking about, Path of Exile and randomized loot and how that's become adapted into newer games, I want to talk about Borderlands. So we're going to shift a little bit from the MMO and go to the MMO-esque looter shooter. And so, you had games like, it was a game called... it was Ragnarok something or other, but it had a different Japanese name. It was way ahead of its time. And then you had Tabula Rasa that came out, which was an MMO. But then, again, ahead of its time, it died. And then you had Warframe that tried to do its thing. And, it was all right. And had it not been for one particular individual, it may have failed, I think, anyway. And they've kind of hinted at this. And... without Total Biscuit's help, I don't think Warframe would have been what it is, and I don't think Destiny would have caught on like it did, and I don't think we would see games like Anthem, Deep Rock Galactic, and it's like these looter shooters are really becoming prevalent.
Yeah, the looter shooters.
So if we take it back to Borderlands, and we looked this up the other night, was the first looter shooter to come out. So it was the first game that really had this randomized loot system. So you had shooters out there where you had loot that could drop, and maybe the loot itself was randomized whether or not it dropped, but the stats were not randomized. When Borderlands came out, it gave us this loot that, like, you could get like an assault rifle that had absolute shit stats on it, and it was just, throw it in a bin. Or you could get one that was fucking amazing. And in Borderlands, you could also trade with your friends. So if you're with somebody and you're a siren and she's using an assault rifle that certain stats and it's her primary weapon, and then your buddy who's I forget what they are, like the hunter, if they get something and it's like, oh, I don't really need this that much, it's kind of cool statted, and then the fucking siren's over there salivating, she's like, I could really use that, you can give it to them. And I think that's so cool, and we've seen that in the evolution of games with this randomized loot.
It's funny you bring that up, because we've been playing Destiny 2, and you can't trade. which
Yeah,
really
that's
sucks.
weird. And I think that's an important component of loot is being able to trade. But we're seeing that more and more as like a way to alleviate gold sellers. I think this really like it hurts the economy, but I think a lot of it still comes back to these companies, these game companies capitalizing on their games. They don't want somebody infringing on that, so they'd rather just put something in place so that way you got to go buy a loot crate instead.
Yeah, that's one thing Warframe does have. Warframe has an economy and it has trading.
Mm-hmm.
So that just came to my head. So
And
anyway, not to throw you off.
Now, as far as Warframe's concerned, your gear is not randomized for the most part. Your gear is your gear. It has certain stats on it, and that can be found in the Warframe wiki. But where the randomization really comes into play with Warframe is, well, you've got the randomization on what's going to drop in terms of mods. But then you also, and that's the huge, I think this is a bigger focus than even weapons, even though there's like a plethora of 200, 300 something weapons you can get in Warframe. It's the fact that you get mods that can randomize your weapons. So they were called Riven mods.
Yep.
So those of you who haven't played Warframe, haven't played a looter shooter, but maybe considering it, not only do you have all this massive customization with random drops that are static, but you also have this customization in the sense that you could get a Riven. And a Riven is a weapon mod that works on a specific weapon, and it has a very high cost to it in terms of the ability to put it into the weapon. But it can modify your weapon to the point where it does like 300% more damage, which I've seen with some of the best.
And you
Rivens.
can re-roll that mod to whatever stats you want.
Randomly, though.
Yeah.
So
But you can customize for days in Warframe. That's one good. I think that's what kept us playing so much.
It is because I love the build theory craft, man.
Yeah, I know. I got you to do all my builds, honestly. Even the ones on YouTube are shit, and then you'd be like, "No, why the fuck are you doing that, man?" And I'm like, "Okay, teach me your ways, oh wise one."
Well, you like the ones that I put together, I'd assume, then.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, yeah, like I really love that, dude. Is like the customization where like you can customize it for optimization, you can customize it for your way of play, you can customize builds for specific types of content, which was great. But those Rivens were sick because if you were a poor dude and you were not buying platinum in that game, platinum was a primary currency that people would buy high-end stuff with because it was just circulating. You had people that would buy stuff and then they would give you platinum, which was used in their store, and then you could get stuff that you couldn't buy from the store that was just a rare drop or whatever. But dude, you could be a poor dude and you go and you do a run that drops a Riven and you crack that Riven open and it's not that great, so you put in the work and you re-roll it 36 times, which is a lot of work. But now you have a thing that's worth 7,000 platinum, which is a ton.
Yeah, that's and just to clarify, that's platinum is real life money.
Yes, it's equivalent of real life money. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so that was awesome. Because me, I don't spend a whole lot of money on games that have what do you want to call it? What do they call it?
Microtransactions.
Microtransact. Yeah, I don't spend a lot of money on that stuff, unless it's just something I really want.
Yeah.
And Warframe was a game where I didn't have to spend money, but in the end I did because I love the dev team so much that I wanted to support them because they're real, they're honest, and they care about what their fans, want.
That's a discussion I'd like to have one day too, is talk a little bit about free to play versus subscription based models. So I think that'd be a good conversation one day. But yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and dev teams, man, that matters.
So when we talked about Warframe, Destiny is similar. Like you've got a lot of randomization on your loot, but there's these static things. You've got some modifications, not mods in the sense of Warframe where you're modding out the entire weapons functionality outside of its base. These are just kind of supplemental features, longer range, better stabilization, hits a little bit harder, and you have very limited space for those. But it's still the same premise. Like you've got this loot that is fairly randomized, or you can do quests and you can buy gear that has mods already built into it, which is kind of neat.
Yeah.
So I don't really have anything more in terms of loot. I'd like to know what you guys think, like in terms of importance and as far as loot is concerned. Like, do you play games because of the loot? Do you play games purely for the adventure? Is it a combination of both? And if, you know, specifically on the topic of loot, like what is enticing about loot for you? Is it the visual effects? Is it looking like a garbage can but having the best stats? Is it not getting the best item level because you have this perfect combination of statistics that actually best in slot, if you will, that outdo better gear? Like, tell us a little bit about your loot experiences, in the chat or in the comments once this thing goes to VOD. Do you have anything else to add, Def?
No, other than, you did say something, so back in, the day, in my EverQuest days, it was weird because they didn't have a lot of graphics to like indicate badass loot except for like high-end raid gear.
Right.
But still, you would see that person and you would just see them standing there and you just know that, man, they got some badass shit, just based off what they were doing. But for me, it's a combination of both. To answer your question, I want to look cool, and I want to have some good loot. I mean, at the same time, I'd rather get my friends' loot, but loot does matter. I can't progress any further without loot. So, whatever the case, loot is very important.
I think for me, it's a prioritization, right? It's me over everybody else until a point. So you reach a point where you're comfortable, where you can make those sacrifices. Like, there's a point where like I'm being carried. I need loot. And then there's a point where I'm contributing. I'm not the best, but I'm doing pretty good. I can forego and I can make those sacrifices and say, you know what? It's a 10% upgrade for me. It's a 100% upgrade for you. Please take it. Yeah,
because I mean, at the end of the day, you're getting loot. You're working your ass off to get loot to help other people, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah, it's about pushing that, in terms of progression, it's about pushing that raid. It's about being able to kill that world boss, as a guild and things like that. And you can't do that if you've got 5 people that are geared and 20 people that are not.
Yeah. I mean, people want you too,
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's got gear.
There's a bunch. I wanted to talk about cosmetics, but I think we're kind of getting over time. So
yeah.
I think we could talk a while about cosmetics and kind of do I think we should just do a hodgepodge stream where we kind of talk a little bit about a bunch of different topics and kind of just go on about other things. But anyway, I think we're going to start to wrap it up here, guys. If you have any questions, please get them through while we close things out here. If you're not already subscribed, be sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell notification icon so that way you're notified when we go live. If you don't want to be notified, we do go live every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so be sure to tune in then, and it's simple to get to us, youtube.com/BattleAxTheater/live, or you can just go to BattleAxTheater YouTube channel and it will show you that we are live. Also, if you haven't, check us out on social media. We are on Facebook, BattleAxTheater. We are on Twitter, BattleAxTheater. We're not super active, but we're trying to get a little bit better there. We do use that as a major platform for announcements, and we have tried to start utilizing those a little bit more. You'll hopefully in the near future start getting some behind-the-scenes stuff once we can get those linked together properly. And last but not least, if you want to join in the conversation, hit that button down in the description with a link to our Discord. It's open join. You are welcome to join us. We are still primarily a shitpost Discord, but there's been a lot more gaming discussion that's been happening as of late because of people that have joined us from YouTube. And we'd love to have more people
joining us too.
Yeah, we've got quite a people from YouTube land that's joined in. So please, if you're interested in having these gaming conversations, join us, and we'd be happy to have you. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add, Def?
No, thanks for watching, and stay tuned for next week's video.
All right, guys. We'll catch you next time.